Good morning, everyone. Our speaker has arrived. May we request everyone to kindly settle down and take your seats as we will begin the program in a few minutes. Thank you. DFA officials, members of the Diplomatic Corps, FSI colleagues, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We're very happy that you're spending your precious time this morning with us. I am Bea Vergara, one of the cadets of the Foreign Service Officers Cadetship Course, Batch 30. It is my honor and pleasure to be your host for this morning's event. Today is a great day to come together and learn from each other as we welcome you to this month's Ambassadors Lecture Series. The Ambassadors Lecture Series, or ALS, is a platform for heads of diplomatic missions in Manila to share their knowledge and expertise, experiences, and advocacies. It aims to build stronger bridges of understanding that will lead us to insights, actions, and a deeper appreciation of our relations to continue achieving our shared goals of cooperation, economic development, and peace. To officially begin the program, allow me to introduce our guest lecturer for this morning. Our speaker for today is the Ambassador of Turkiye to the Philippines, His Excellency Niyazi Evren Akyol. The ambassador has decades of experience working in Asia after being posted in Jakarta from 2003 to 2005, Bangkok from 2007 to 2009, and Tokyo from 2009 to 2011. These assignments led to the ambassador's designation as Deputy Director General and later Minister Plenipotentiary of the Turkish Foreign Ministry's Deputy Director General for Southeast Asia and the Pacific from 2018 to 2022. Within the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he has also served as head of department during separate assignments at its Deputy Director General for Energy and Multilateral Transportation and Deputy Director General for Foreign Policy Analysis and Coordination, respectively. Prior to his assignment in Manila, the ambassador served as Consul General of the Turkish Consulate in Burgas, Bulgaria from 2013 to 2017. To share his thoughts on Turkish foreign and security policy in this challenging world, please join me in welcoming on stage the Ambassador of Turkey to the Philippines, His Excellency Niyazi Evren Akyol.
All right. Okay, much better now. Well, Mrs. Kapko, Executive Director of the Foreign Service Institute, dear colleagues from the diplomatic community, and dear members of the FSI, and ladies and gentlemen, it is a particular pleasure for me to be with you this morning here at the DFA, at the FSI to be more specific. And I'm here to talk about a little bit about Turkish foreign and defense policy, which is a very complicated one at this time. First of all, let me just give you the outline of this lecture. Next, please. Yeah. So I'll make a brief introduction and then mention the principles of Turkish foreign policy, the focuses, the foci of the foreign policy, and then I'll mention a little bit about the Turkish defense industry and defense policy. And then if we have time left, I can also briefly touch on the Turkish-Filipino relations. We'll see. Next, please. So yes, you probably heard of Turkey. So just a brief clarification. The word Türkiye is the one that we use in our language for our country. Turkey is an English pronunciation of it, but 2 years ago we have made the Turkish version of this as the official one. So when I say Türkiye, what is that? That is actually the official name of the country now. It will take a while for it to catch on, but just to clarify that. I'm sure you've heard of it, heard of Turkey before. To compare with the Philippines, for example, it is a country of 85 million people, which is smaller than the Philippines. We have a land area of 780,000 square kilometers, which is something like almost 2.5 times the Philippines area. If you bunch all the islands up, that is 300,000, as far as I know, for the Philippines. Major cities are Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, but probably Istanbul is the most famous one. Geographically speaking, we are at the crossroads of a large geography. Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, Central Asia, Middle East, North Africa, they are all within 1,000 kilometers of our borders. And historically, we have interacted intensely with all these regions, not by choice, by location. We had to interact with these regions. So our culture reflects all of these regions, something from all of these regions, plus what we have originally into a unique culture, which visitors from all these regions can actually find a lot of things familiar for them, which is actually a great facilitator in our foreign policy. We have a relatively, next please, we have a relatively young and dynamic population, not as young and dynamic as the Filipino population. Of course, you have to put this in context. For example, Europe is much older now in the sense that population is majority older, whereas Turkey still has some population dividend, as the popular phrase is right now. But one footnote to this is that our population growth is actually slowing down, and so within 20, 30 years it will stop, 20 years even. So we have this few decades of opportunity in terms of making use of this potential. Next, please. So, as you know, in the world affairs, two things are important. Well, a few things. One is population, and the other is economy. If you have a big population but a weak economy, then it's a difficult situation. And in terms of the Turkish economy, we have in PPP terms, purchasing power parity terms, we are the 11th largest economy right now, which is around $3.5 trillion in purchasing power parity terms. So this is, Turkish economy is a lecture in itself, but it is an economy which has a very large industrial base and an even larger service sector and a smaller agricultural sector. So it is, some international organizations classify Turkey as a developed country, but we still consider ourselves as a developing country because the development is not evenly spread across the whole of the country. Some areas, some parts of the country are behind the curve, and so kind of dragging down the average. But this is the 100th year of the Turkish Republic, and actually there is a great improvement in that regard. I mean, I'll just touch upon a few sectors in the Turkish economy, but one that might be interesting for you, next please, is the next slides please, is the tourism sector. This is relevant in the Philippines, in the ASEAN actually. We are one of the largest tourist destinations in the world right now. We have attracted 56 million tourists last year, leaving $54 billion of revenue. So, to give you an idea, 40 years ago, this number was really small. When I was a kid, tourists were rare. It was Cold War, and just Western Europeans would come and in small numbers. But there was significant investment and government support in those 40 years. And so we have this situation now, the tourism industry, infrastructure. There has been an enormous investment in the country's infrastructure, as a result of which actually maybe I should briefly mention the Turkish construction sector is the second largest in the world right now, second only to China. We are head to head with the US construction, but still number 2 in the world. So this is a great asset in economic diplomacy, so to speak, because infrastructure is relevant for everyone. Everyone wants to build something, a bridge, a road, highway, trains, stadium, large buildings for government, and the Turkish construction sector can do it all. And which actually ties that into another factor which multiplies our economic diplomacy is the infrastructure development. Next, please. So you see just one example of the advantages of having this is that we have recently opened, meaning around 5 years ago, the new Istanbul airport. You may or may not have been through this airport, but it is one of the largest in the world. The estimated capacity when it's finished will be around more than 200 million passengers per year. It still didn't complete all of its runways, but that previous number of 56 million is only possible because of this infrastructure. Philippines is an island country, so even more dependent on air travel for attracting tourists, but it is also relevant for a land country like Turkey. If you want to bring in people, they will fly into your country. They will not drive to your country unless they are immediately close to you. So this is also the infrastructure in the country now, in Turkey now, also helps out with the foreign policy in the sense that it creates connectivity inside the country. It mobilizes resources more effectively. And actually, it can now connect different regions. All those regions I mentioned, Europe, Middle East, Central Asia, Africa, they are connected through railroads and roads and ports and airports with Turkey. So there are many other aspects of the Turkish economy that is worth mentioning here, but given the time limitations, I only chose a few highlights to give you a brief sense of what we are talking about here, what kind of a country, what kind of an economy does it have behind its foreign policy, what population is supporting this. And there is, of course, the most important aspect of a country's power is military power. Some disagree with this, some don't like this idea, and I understand that, and I really wish there was a world in which There was no need for armies and power politics, but as of now and for the foreseeable future, in our lifetimes, everybody's lifetimes in this room, military power actually is the basis of all national power. Everything else is put next to it or on top of it. So without it, your counterparts interact with you quite differently. If you have a strong national defense, if you have a strong national defense industry, then your counterparts regard you differently. If you are weak, then they treat you quite differently from the other scenario. We have learned this the hard way. So next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So well, here is a satellite picture of the country's location, with a slight prejudice towards the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean in this picture. But our primary challenge, as it is actually for every country, location, your geography defines everything. Again, in international relations, this is called geographical determinism. And there are many theorists hating this, and there are articles and so on and so forth trying to prove that this is not relevant in this day and age. Yes, you can build infrastructure, you can, reduce distances, you can overcome mountains, you can bore tunnels through it, and yes, but actually, in our case, we have learned, and I think many countries, many decision makers will have to agree that your geography defines everything. It defines who your neighbors are. It defines what your resources are. It defines your location, defines how big a population you can support. You can have a huge area, but if you're in the Arctic, you cannot support 50 million, 100 million people. You can be a very small country in a fertile part of the world, and you can support, like the Philippines, quite sizable population. What resources you have, what kind of neighbors you have, how the geography faces your country also defines your relations with your neighbors. Is your country isolated? Is it separated from everyone else by seas, by mountains, by deserts? Then you become an insular, like an insulated culture. You're safer, you feel safer. You have less wars, less traumas. But if you are at easy reach of your neighbors and vice versa, then interaction is sometimes, if not often, violent at some points in history. You will have more frequent wars. Your culture will be shaped differently. The climate you have, the historic experience with regards to your neighbors you have, they are all tied to geography. And this also defines your national culture. Some countries are more motivated, more, they have a more grim worldview, and others more relaxed, and this is also because of geography. And so in our case, this location, as you see in this map, historically has proven two things. One, whoever controls this, the Anatolian Peninsula and the Marmara Sea, Sea of Marmara, whoever controls this area, if they are strong, then you have access to a lot of regions. You can project your influence, your power, your economy, all of that into these regions very easily. So this becomes an opportunity to expand your influence, if not your borders. But the other side is that if the power controlling this geography is weak, for any reason, civil war, economic collapse, societal chaos, whatever, then all of these regions that you had access to suddenly have access to you. They can come as threats into you very easily, and they can bring a lot of hurt. So this has been broader historical trend in this geography. That location is a challenge and an opportunity at the same time. But if we fast forward to today, there are a lot of global fractures in politics and economy in the world today. Some of them in the western part of Eurasia, some in the eastern part. I'm using a different terminology. Instead of saying Middle East and Europe, it's one huge continent, you know, from Portugal to Japan, so Eurasia. And we can say that there are changing balances of power, and geopolitical equations are quite fluid these days, manifesting themselves in an increasing number of wars, increasing numbers of number of instability cropping up. These come in the form of fragile countries, conflicts, refugee crisis, international terrorism, poverty, climate change, and rising populism in many parts of the world. So in this kind of a world, we find ourselves at the center of most of these developments, unfortunately. If you go through the list of the wars and conflicts of the past 30 years, 40 years, 80% of them are around us, very near, sometimes bordering our country. Just from the 80s, I mean, Middle East is always a mess, but in the 80s there was the Iran-Iraq war, multiple wars involving Israel and Arab countries, one iteration of which we are going through right now. There were 2 wars in the Balkans, Kosovo and Bosnia. Many conflicts in Caucasus. There was Chechnya War I, Chechnya War II, Georgia, Russia War, and Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict twice, one in 90s, one in 2020. So Eastern Mediterranean, war in Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine war, which actually is perhaps you can say this is the second stage of that conflict. First was the invasion of Crimea in 2014. People all forget it now, but it started then. So all around us, we find conflict, active wars. I didn't even mention the wars in Afghanistan, which is 3 hours flight from Istanbul. Wars in Iraq, 2 times wars there. So it's all right at the border. Civil war in Syria. If you live in a neighborhood like that, then you need a different set of principles. Next, please. So, first, all foreign policy has to have some principles underlying it. Whether it is possible, feasible, or practical to implement these principles every time in all instances, probably not. But you have to have some anchor, a moral anchor to your foreign policy. So Turkish foreign policy, by design, is balanced and based on dialogue. So all these conflicts around, you can't just close your eyes and wish them away. You have to get involved with it, like try to solve these problems if you can. These problems, the totality of them far surpass our national power. At this point in time, we cannot dominate these problems. We cannot impose our own solution to all of these problems. Instead, we try to bridge these differences if we can. So diplomacy, dialogue, and a sense of balance is very important for Turkish foreign policy. And it has to have multiple foci, multiple focuses. We cannot focus on just one area, one geography as our primary motivator of foreign policy. This is different from 90% of the countries in the world. Most countries have just one region in mind, and that's because that's their geography. And they have a more fortunate, more stable geography. You are in your region, and that region is your focus. Latin America, for example, countries in Latin America, primary focus is their neighbors, their integration. It's like a family. Southeast Asian countries, like the Philippines, primary focus, Southeast Asia, which manifests itself in ASEAN. So everyone in ASEAN, no exceptions, primarily focuses on Southeast Asia. And then you see different countries have different outreaches. Some reach out more and farther, some less. Again, depending on their geography, their population, their national resources, and all that. In our case, though, we cannot afford, I mean, you can put a guy who believes that we should only focus on Europe at the head of this our country, or another guy saying that forget about it, we should focus on the Middle East. This is a practical impossibility. We have to engage with all of these regions. We have to be intimately knowledgeable with all of these regions: Eastern Europe, Russia, Middle East, Central Asia, Europe. Different parts of Europe tick differently. So the name Europe shouldn't mislead you. There are, in practice, multiple Europes. There is a European Union, which is a marvel of an institution, but at the end of the day, it is still national governments that do national politics, national interests, and the European Union is strong today because the members choose to engage, take it as a basis of their foreign policy. The moment they think this is not serving our national interests, they will bolt out for whatever reason. Brexit is only a small example, but anyway, so there are multiple Europes, multiple Middle Easts. There are different parts of the Middle East that tick differently. To give you an idea, we are neighbors with Iran, for example. For most countries, Iran is a far away problem and a nuisance and under sanctions and so on and so forth. But for us, it's a neighbor. We cannot just act like in a country 2,000 kilometers away. We have deep social, historic ties with Iran, for example. You can't ignore these things. So, yes, and another aspect of the Turkish foreign policy is we choose to be on the side of the vulnerable and the oppressed to the extent as possible in terms of our capabilities. And this is just the ideological, not ideological, but the conceptual outline. So we have to look different directions at all times. Sometimes one direction demands more attention, or there is an opportunity of cooperation in another one. So you see us engaging in that area. And there is always the commentator that comes up, looking at whichever direction we are focused at that moment. Turkey is diverting itself, becoming to this, to that. It attracts attention. It's nice for the column that you write, but it is a very limited perspective of what we are doing. Having said all of this, there are certain interactions and institutions or countries in our foreign policy that occupy an outsized role compared to others. First of all, worthy of mentioning among these is NATO. Next, please. Yes. So you probably heard of NATO. It is the strongest military alliance on planet Earth right now. The backbone of this alliance is the North Atlantic, which is a very outdated geopolitical area right now. Nothing is going on in the North Atlantic. Turkey is now is a member since 1952, a few years after its inception. NATO was founded in Cold War against the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, so to speak. We have the second largest army in this alliance. The first one is, of course, the United States. And you should know, United States is the center of NATO, provides most of the capabilities and the weight of this alliance. I am mentioning this because of the special relationship the Philippines has with the United States. Again, history, geography, and other factors make this a reality for the Philippines. You may like this, you may not like this. Just like in our case, we may like this or that. There is a reality that we have to live in. But Turkey's army, the Turkish army, is now not only a head count army, that you count the heads and it's the second largest, but it is one of the top providers of capability contribution inside NATO. NATO is a very expensive alliance. If you want to become a member today, any country, Philippines, let's say it is possible. Let's say NATO said, come on, you can become a member. You have to spend billions, tens of billions of dollars to bring your army up to the common standard of NATO. That is the whole point. In a, God forbid, general war, all the members, they would be able to send each other spare parts, ammunition, equipment. If we have different standards, then what's the point? We don't have common operational basis. So Turkish army, Turkish armed forces, or rather, is one of the most capable forces in our region. There is much to be said about NATO, its evolution, Turkey's place in it, and our agreements and disagreements. But I'm just giving you the headlines or the titles here. The second relationship that I have to mention is the EU. The next one, please. Yeah, so, well, maybe I should say Turkish relationship with Europe in general. European Union is a factor as far as Europe is concerned. Our relationship goes 60 years now, when you think about it. 1963, the association agreement, which put on the table the goal of full membership in 1963. And we have a customs union, which became actualized in 1996. It is not a universal customs union, though. It's partial. It doesn't involve services. It's a customs union of goods, mostly, and there are certain limitations there as well. We have only started negotiations in 2005. And the thing is, the Turkish-European relations, let's say EU relationship, is very complex, very deep. There are tens of billions of dollars of trade, maybe hundreds, I can say, of billions of dollars trade involved. So we are one of the largest trading partners of the EU, so to speak. We are probably one of the, if not the most critical security partner of the EU, because what EU and the members of the EU perceive as threats, and this not only involves the military threats, which is more kind of a NATO purview, international terrorism, migration, illegal migration, this kind of thing, probably the most important country for the EU. We are again one of the most important, if not the most important, energy security partner of Europe. We are not providing energy to Europe. We don't have energy. We are buying all our energy ourselves. But we are a vital link for the EU in terms of reaching into the energy resources of others. There are various pipelines stretching out from Central Asia through the Caspian Sea, from Caucasus, from the Middle East, that all come into Turkey, and then from Russia also, from Russia. They all get distributed to markets in Europe, one way or another. So energy diversification is very important for Europe, and Turkey is perhaps the most important conduit for this diversification. Of course, there is the LNG, but there is only so much you can do with the LNG. But with all that, there are also political complications. The rise of the far right in Europe makes it extremely complicated for the Turkish membership into the EU. There are multiple roadblocks and problems with that process. These days, mostly political obstacles in Europe are more pronounced and make it not feasible right now. But the fact that nobody is walking away, I mean, we can always say, all right, it's not going anywhere, so let's drop this. Or the Europeans can say this, but no one is saying this. So it's a sign that people just don't want to step back, even though we are not stepping forward with our membership of the EU, which probably will stay stagnant for many decades to come. Just as a footnote, we are not part of the Schengen arrangement, and we are not part of the Euro currency union. We have our own currency. So these mostly, with a few exceptions, these come only with your membership with the EU. So that's another one. Next thing I will mention is the Turkish-American alliance, separate from the NATO, because NATO's focus is quite singular, which is, we can say it was the Soviet Union before, and now it's Russia, NATO's security focus. It did not fight or plan to fight in anywhere but Europe. There was a deployment in Afghanistan, maybe, but that's not what the planning is for, the NATO planning. So, but the Turkish-American relations go way back, diplomatic relations, 20s, but serious relations after the Second World War. So we are allies for 70 years, so kind of ringing a bell with the Philippines here. We have a separate strategic partnership, and this is a very complicated relationship again. We have many areas of common interest and cooperation, but many areas of strong disagreement that we feel the need mutually, that we have to manage almost constantly. Some of these disagreements are very difficult, concerning Syria, for example. We have had throughout the 70 years multiple instances of breakdown of this relationship. We had crisis, but serious crisis. There were periods of U.S. embargo, arms embargo on Turkey in the 70s, for example, in response to our intervention into Cyprus, despite our being a NATO member and all that. So we don't have like a flawless, happy, like exemplary line of interactions. But the strength of an alliance isn't measured by the absence of problems or crisis, but by whether that relationship survives those crises. Whether while you hate the guy, they want to punch you in your face because you did things or they did things, like you're really loaded. But do you just take a deep breath and go into the room and try to fix it? Do you have reasons to do that? I mean, it's, you don't like them, they don't like you, they shout, okay, let's just go. No, there are always the reasons of cooperation, the benefits of cooperation have always outweighed breaking those relations. If in any time at your careers or observation of international relations, you come across news that there is now a crisis between Turkey and the US, you should view it in that perspective. The mutual benefit from this throughout those 70 years have been immense, and it's another topic for a lecture. What exactly are those mutual interests? United States is a very astute calculator of national interest, and so are we, if I have to say. But I am just giving you again a brief headline. Before going to the next, next one, yeah. So just a brief interlude before I go to other regions. As a complement to our increasing engagement over the past 20 years with multiple regions, increasingly so, our diplomatic service also increased. So right now we are, I think, number 2 or 3 in terms of the number of diplomatic missions abroad. We have 283 missions now. Embassies, consulates, and permanent representations in international institutions. These are all over the world: Africa, Latin America, Europe, consulates everywhere. Next, please. So, having mentioned the NATO, the EU, the US, I have to also mention we have actually outreaches to other geographies. We have a very deep outreach into Africa since the past 20 years. Africa has been major focus of Turkish foreign policy. This is more, it started as an economic incentive, but we went in with a different model. We didn't go in there to, load up as much of the resources into the truck, throw some money and speed away. We focused on establishing partnerships with African countries. We worked hard to earn their trust, and they are really fed up with white people coming with, promises and actually shortchanging them. So they have also observed our intentions for 20 years, and I can say proudly that by now they have understood we have a different agenda. We're not there to exploit anyone, but we are interested in partnerships. So as a result of this, we have embassies virtually in all African countries, perhaps just 3 or 4 remains out of the whole continent, I mean, including North Africa. If you speak of sub-Saharan Africa, probably only a few countries remain. For example, South Sudan, we have an embassy there, and like everywhere, Turkish business people are very visible in Africa right now. So if in your careers you go to Filipino embassies in Africa, chances are you will have Turkish counterparts there. Chances are you will see Turkish products on the shelves. Chances are you will be entering a building built by Turkish contractors. You'll like many buildings, maybe you will see them being built there. You probably won't see it, but it's because it's not visible. We have also military cooperation with a lot of African countries. So Africa has evolved from an economic focus into a political partner focus in our foreign policy. Latin America is a very important area for our outreach. We have a separate outreach perspective with Latin America. Again, we have embassies with virtually all Latin American countries, from Argentina all the way to Mexico. Perhaps just a few Central American countries remain. But I'm sure those will be filled soon as well. We are an observer country to the Organization of Latin American Cooperation. Similarly, we are an observer to African Union. So we are also trying to reach out to the institutions in these regions. And there are all sorts of numbers and statistics that I can bombard you with about these relations, but I'll spare you those. But I'll just wanted to mention these are also important areas of focus. One other area that I should mention is Central Asia. Central Asia is special because we Turks originally come from that region 1,000 years ago. The winds of history threw us that way, and now we are in Anatolia, in this country called Türkiye now. And there are many Turkic nations that remained there. And we have linguistic, cultural, religious, even affiliations, links with Central Asian countries. Our focus on Central Asia is as old as the end of the Cold War. During Cold War, it was all Soviet Union. There was nothing. There is now an organization of Turkic countries, which is increasing its institutional structure slowly. Surprising, perhaps for you, a footnote would be that Hungary has become an observer country to the Organization of Turkic Countries, because originally, historically, the name Hungary comes from the Huns, which come from Central Asia. So many Hungarians consider their roots to be in Central Asia. So this is an example of how one angle of an initiative can open doors for cooperation for another one in another unexpected quarter. We are very active economically there. I think Central Asia, Russia, China, and Turkey are the main 3 active players there. So if you're posted there, you will also see very large Turkish embassies, Turkish companies, products, and visits from Turkey all the time. A Turkish president, Turkish foreign minister, or other cabinet members. We have also, I have to mention, a very advanced relationship with Russia itself. So this is part of this whole framework. We have a lot of economic cooperation, we have energy cooperation, we have even nuclear cooperation, nuclear reactors. They are building 4 reactors in Turkey. And so here perhaps I should mention one advantage of having connections with so many parts of the world, at least in this region, with countries that others don't have the best relations with, actually enables us to be mediators when there is need for mediation to take place, but the two sides or the sides involved don't trust each other. So they don't want to make the first move. They don't want to talk to each other directly. So that is where we may, given the right conditions, emerge as a mutually trusted partner for those sides. So this enabled us to involve ourselves in the mediation in Russia-Ukraine conflict, the grain deal, you know, which also affected large parts of the world. We didn't know until then that most of our grain was coming from Russia and Ukraine until the war started there. I didn't know. So we had a similar situation with Iran-Iraq war in the 80s. They hated each other and they didn't want to talk, but they talked through us and we were able to mediate. So we have this tradition of diplomacy and mediation, and I'll also make a small tangent here to the Philippines, that we are part of the Southern Philippine peace process. So using our experience and our tradition of diplomacy and mediation, if any country reaches out to us, or if our contribution would be helpful, then we try our best. Such is the case in the Philippines. So even today, the decommissioning part of the peace process here is overseen by a Turkish ambassador, not me. Another guy from Ankara is responsible for IDB. I don't know if you heard of this, international decommissioning, independent decommissioning body. So, are there any region I forgot? Yeah, probably not. Of course, South Asia, India, Pakistan, we have relations with them as well, which is also sizable. But of course, for you, more interesting is the Asia Pacific, our outreach to Asia Pacific. Now, Asia Pacific is larger than ASEAN. It involves East Asia and Southeast Asia. Now there is this new fancy phrase, Indo-Pacific, connecting the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. It is a useful conceptualization, but it doesn't have that much of relevance on all topics, if you say, because the economic connectivity between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific isn't that much. It's more of a military conceptualization. Indo-Pacific is a more geopolitical, more strategic idea. Maybe perhaps in the coming decades, there will be a more integration between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean countries, perhaps. But that is why I'm sticking with the Asia Pacific so far, not to try to cover everything. This is a more practical and more relevant phrase so far. So we have strategic relations with China, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, and Singapore so far. We have free trade agreements with Malaysia, South Korea, and Singapore, and negotiating with Japan, Thailand, and Indonesia, and Pakistan also as an addendum there. China's Belt and Road Initiative. It kind of is not the hot topic anymore as it used to be, perhaps 10 years ago when it first was put on the table, because the idea is very catchy. China's trillions of dollars suddenly materializing into ports and bridges and roads. There is, of course, success in it and there is disappointment in it. But one area that is relevant for Turkey is the land corridor that the Belt and Road Initiative envisaged. Uh, the belt is the ocean, and the road is the path connecting China with Europe, the old Silk Road, so to speak. So the Chinese belt, the road originally foresaw two roads, one reaching into Russia and then reaching to Europe, and the other reaching into Iran and then reaching to Mediterranean. But the southern route didn't take off because of the difficulties Iran is having for various reasons, and also turmoil in the Middle East made it impossible. The Russian path was for a while functional, but now with the war in Ukraine, I'm not sure if the Chinese goods are reaching Europe through Russia and Belarus. I'm not sure, I don't want to speculate here, but probably not the same. So these two routes gone, the only remaining alternative is through Turkey. So Central Asia, China, Central Asia, Caspian Sea, Caucasus, and Turkey. We call this the middle corridor. And so the Chinese warmed up to this idea over time, and now it is part of our dialogue with China. China is in this region is at the center of many things, many opportunities and many problems. So many crises also, and I don't have to mention the situation with regards to the Philippines, but we also have an important relationship with China. It's more a trade, it's a commercial relationship, but the Chinese are becoming more active in the Middle East slowly. In Central Asia, they are already a very big presence. So these are creating synergies now that we try to put into an operational perspective. Japan, of course, South Korea, we have special relationships with these countries. We took part in the Korean War, third or fourth largest contribution. 20,000 Turkish troops rotated in and out of Korea in the 50s. With Japan, our relationship goes back to the Ottoman times. So we have familiarity and outreach with all of these regions that I mentioned. But as far as the Southeast Asian angle is concerned, we have embassies in all ASEAN countries. And 8 out of 10 ASEAN countries have embassies in Ankara, our capital. Only Myanmar, for obvious reasons, and Laos, for economic reasons, don't have embassies yet. But all the others have, and we have. We are trying to switch to consulates now, trying to increase consulates in Southeast Asia. And not only are we developing our bilateral relations with each ASEAN country, but also we are developing our relations with ASEAN as an institution. We are a sectoral dialogue partner of ASEAN, which is a step below the dialogue partnership, which is the real relevant one with the Leaders Summit and the defense forum, regional forum. It is our aim to become a dialogue partner. There is a moratorium for that in ASEAN, but we are pushing really hard to have an exception in the next 10 years, so to speak. And our increasing presence in this region is slowly paving the way, hopefully, for this. because with all our background in mediation and security policy and all security diplomacy, we can contribute a lot to ASEAN's workings and perspectives. So, next please. So I have to also finally mention, in terms of foreign policy, perhaps the terrorism angle. It affects everyone in the world, big and small. People are affected by international terrorism, and being at the crossroads of many problematic regions, we have been the focus of terrorist organizations for decades, different ones. So while trying to take care of those threats ourselves, we also incorporated this in our foreign policy. So for us, there is no good or bad terrorists, so it has to be an international effort. We are supporting countries far or near against all of it. There is an alphabet soup there. You see these are some of the primary terrorist organizations that we deal with nationally. FETÖ is a religious cult that infiltrated Turkish government institutions over the course of 40 years and tried to overthrow government when it was found out. PKK is a separatist organization. Their offshoots are in Syria, PYD and YPG. The Daesh is commonly known as ISIS in English discourse. And the HKPC is a Marxist-Leninist terrorist organization seeking refuge mostly in Europe these days. And this is mostly the briefest, although it's been around an hour, that I've tried to touch upon very fast on a few topics. This is the broad outlines of the main attention areas of Turkish foreign policy. Now, at this stage, we can do a few things. I can take your questions because unfortunately, we won't have time for perhaps I also plan to talk a little bit about the Turkish defense industry and military policy, perhaps, and how it evolved and so on. But this being 10 past 10 right now, probably we won't have time. Also, Filipino relations, we may not have time. So maybe I can have some questions, if you will. Yes, very quick one. Yes.
Good morning, Ambassador.
Good morning.
I'm Carla from the Foreign Service Institute. I actually have two questions. One is in relation to the corridors that you have mentioned. So my first question is, how does the situation of Afghanistan impact the viability of the land corridors? The second question is actually related to defense industry. I understand that Turkey's desire for autonomy. However, I would like to ask, how does it balance with the need for cost and the increase in economies of scale? So that's my second question.
Thank you. Very good questions. With regard to Afghanistan, you know, if you look at the map of Eurasia, not Asia, not Europe, but Eurasia as a geographical unit, and believe me, it's a geographical unit. Actually, it's only our human perception that we find a line and say this is Europe and this is Asia. A space alien visiting our planet would identify it as one large mass, and Europe as only a peninsula on that. But anyway, on that Eurasian continent, Afghanistan is the dead center, the geographical center of it all. And that's why it attracted attention of outside powers. Today, it's in a very difficult position since 1970s. it of course hinders all efforts of connectivity, basically. What happens is that countries are bypassing Afghanistan, trying to bypass, and it's not working out that well. But people are working on these solutions. There is China's effort to reach the Indian Ocean. They are trying to work with Pakistan and Myanmar before the civil war that is there. There are other efforts. India has had an effort of connecting with Central Asia through Afghanistan, but with the Taliban's capture of government, it kind of stalled. Which at this point I should say, we have an embassy still active in Kabul right now. We did not close it when Taliban took over. We have, you probably are tired of hearing of this, but we have historic relations with Afghanistan going way back, like 300-400 years. And so they trust our country, they trust our initiatives and intentions. And we made it clear to the Taliban that for us, the welfare and peace and stability of Afghanistan is most important, and we are willing to stay if they are also willing to provide us with the security. And I said yes. And so I still have our embassy open there. We are trying to influence the developments there positively. It's a very complicated topic, Afghanistan, subject to perhaps a number of lectures. I cannot go in there. But right now, the connectivity projects are not going anywhere in Afghanistan. But our Middle Corridor initiative did not include it in the first place, so it's not affected. For your second question, defense industry, it became, it was, right now, the Turkish defense industry have become very capable. It can now produce top-of-the-line defense items from main battle tanks to ships, aircraft carriers of a certain size, and drones, and whatnot. All kinds of AI is incorporated in it and so on. Technologically very innovative, the Turkish defense industry now. And this happened over the course of 30 years. And we are part of NATO. We are supposed to have access to best weaponry in the world. This is the Western Alliance. But in our case, we realized that our national interest drives us to do certain things at certain points in his time. And it is upsetting some of our allies, to the point that I mentioned the embargo previously, but it's not the only one. Other countries, I'm not going to name, like, this is not the point, I'm not trying to showcase anything. But multiple NATO countries, defense producers, refuse to sell us weapons because of our actions following our national interest. And that put us into a very difficult position. And a reflexive decision was taken to develop our capabilities. And we didn't know back then how far we can go. We aimed high, okay, but we were realistic. We didn't launch ourselves into fantasies. We started small with smaller weapon systems. And we had one thing going on for us. That second largest army in NATO is also a very, very big customer of buying weapons. So as our defense industry started to produce something, there was a buyer. We didn't have to look for a foreign source. And it's very difficult to sell internationally before having a solid base of your own. It happened incrementally. And for example, you heard of Turkish drones. they changed the course of a number of wars in Africa, in Europe, in Caucasus, in Libya, in sub-Saharan Africa, other places. 15 years ago, a very close ally refused to sell us four drones that we asked, that we needed as part of our counterterrorism effort. And that cost a lot of lives. But we started working on our own, and that's how it began. I mean, we owe our defense industry to the eagerness of our partners to exclude us from their sales. Practically, this is the case. And so, Philippines actually is a partner now. We are offering a lot of fancy names, solutions, this defense industry terminology, solutions to Philippines. The attack helicopters is being one of them. You had a question? Yeah.
Teşekkür ederiz,
Oh.
Assistance.
Teşekkürler.
I used to be Consul General in Ankara and the Deputy Chief of Mission also.
Oh, excellent.
Just a good segue to the second question. How prepared is Turkey to step up its bilateral defense cooperation with the Philippines, especially in supplying more capital armaments like warships, tanks, etc.?
We are in a very good position to do so. We are in constant contact with Philippines armed forces, all branches, Air Force, Navy, Army, Coast Guard. And separate from the military angle, we have one of the largest shipbuilding infrastructures in the world, one of the largest shipbuilders in the world. So this also enables us to switch that infrastructure to use for military purposes. And we have very sizable military shipbuilders. And we equip these ships with Turkish weapons. We do not, I mean, there are certain partners of the Philippines that we understand now what happened previously, that they sold weapons to Philippines, but they actually put it together and sold. So it's not all national for them. So that's a problem logistically. But in our case, for example, for the Philippines, Corvette, there is a ship size like 100 meters. Corvette is a ship like 100 meters long. It has surface-to-surface capability, like can engage other ships. Some models have air defense, most don't. And they can also do anti-submarine warfare. They have good scanning radars, they can create awareness. So this kind of ship is very suitable for Philippines' security problems, present and on the horizon. And thanks for asking this, because just in, like tomorrow actually, one of those national corvettes is coming to Manila. One of our newest corvettes, which we sold to a lot of countries in our neighborhood and far also. It's called the Milgem National Ship. That's a Turkish abbreviation. Battle control management systems, for example, are very important. It's an electronic thing. I mean, how your ship talks with the different parts of. There is a brain there talking with the missile, the radar. So if it is not yours, that's a problem. So we had developed the Turkish battle management system and actively used it. So it comes with that package. So if you want to see that ship up close, actually you can visit it. It's going to be open to public Let me tell you, when was that? Tomorrow, I think. Yeah, June 27. From 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. That ship will be open to public. But if you want to go there, you have to send an email. We have it on uh, our social media. That's because to inform the port authorities, the entry is restricted there. They don't take anyone usually, but if your name is there, they will. But we can also offer smaller ships from patrol vessels of 10 meters, 20, 50, and you can choose the components, whatever you need. You can actually choose to buy other people's components if you want. We can give you just the ship, a naked ship, and you can buy parts if that is your choice. Otherwise, we put it on with our own parts. So naval platforms is a very fertile ground for defense industry cooperation with the Philippines. It's not an empty field, of course, there is competition. There are other countries very interested in the same platforms. So at this point, we hope to be one of the options, which we see is the case actually. And we'll see we will see if our package will prove to be attractive enough for the needs of the Philippine Navy and the Coast Guard. We're also talking to the Coast Guard. Oh, okay. So no more questions, I understand. So, oh, well, there is one. One, yeah.
Greetings, Ambassador. My name is Ricardo M. Lumaca Jr. I'm from Mindanao State University. So Greece and Turkey are at odds over territorial waters and airspace in the Aegean Sea. Similarly, the Philippines faces challenges with China's expansive claims in the South China Sea. So my question is, considering the similarities in the territorial disputes faced by Turkey in the Aegean Sea and the Philippines in the South China Sea, how is Turkey's foreign and security policy approach in its tensions with Greece comparable to the Philippines? And also, I would like to know what are the lessons might the Philippines draw from Turkey's handling of its regional disputes, particularly in balancing national security interest with diplomatic engagement and alliances?
Sure. Thank you. Well, there is actually our disputes in the Aegean have some parallels with the disputes in West Philippine Sea. I mean, I can go into the details of that, but you probably wouldn't be interested that much. But I can say this much, is that on the surface, it looks like Greece has a lot of islands, like 3,000 islands in the Aegean Sea, and there are formations, like, you know, the phrase, that are not islands, and there are disputed formations like that. So one caveat that I have to give you is that if you look at those 3,000 islands, and then you look at the Philippines, well, we have 7,000 islands. So it looks like we have a lot of things in common with Greece, and Turkey is like China trying to encroach into all these islands and so on. So like the issue is whether islands generate exclusive economic zone, whether islands generate the continental shelf, and so on. So if you just look at the island situation, you may think actually you should have more parallels with Greece. But you have to understand, Greece has 3,000 islands. That is correct. But according to UNCLOS, if you want to be counted as an island country, the majority of your land area should be islands. In the case of Greece, those 3,000 islands make up only a small percentage of their land area. So our problems with Greece is between two continental countries. So the Philippines is an island country, so island countries are treated differently in UNCLOS. So the islands of an island country generate EEZ. It generates a continental shelf in a preferential way. Okay? But in our case, the Greek islands are not belonging to an island state, but a continental state owning the islands. So what is essentially happening is Greece is pushing those islands to have the same rights as an island country would. And when we oppose this, they are outraged because we ignore the presence of those islands just abutting our shore. So there is a lot of technical aspect to it, but in our opinion, we have more in common with the Philippines in our concern about consequences of island formations and whether they should generate EEZ or continental shelf and so on. Actually, we have a lot of parallel opinions that common interests with the Philippines that we should work on together. I mean, if you have the Greek ambassador here, of course, he will give you the Greek perspective. I don't want to, engage in an imaginary tit for tat with him. They say that and we say that. So that's not the point. I mean, there's a lot of things involved. There is the airspace issue. There's the naval areas issue. The EEZs are becoming an issue. Continental shelf is an issue. And gray zone island formations are an issue. We have theses, they have theses. Frankly, nobody cares about these things. Only these two countries care. But on a positive note, we are now in a very good, strong dialogue with Greece about these things. And so hopefully, I mean, it's very worrying for us, the situation in the West Philippine Sea, because what happens there, everybody is going to get affected. No one can say that we are too far, I don't care. No. This is not too far. Half the world's trade is passing there, and you'll get hurt if something goes wrong there. So we are very worried. And Turkish foreign policy, as I described here, emphasizes diplomacy, mediation, international law, the primacy of international law. So these are principles that brings us together. So I think there is a lot of things that the Turkey and Philippines has a very sound basis for going forward. And we can exchange our perceptions and experiences about how we deal with our situations. So perhaps that's the extent of what I can say here. Yeah.
And with that, we close the open forum. We at the Foreign Service Institute would like to express our sincere thanks and appreciation to Your Excellency Ambassador Niyazi Evren Akyol for gracing us with your presence and imparting your invaluable insights on our country's relations. At this point, may I call to the front the Ambassador, as well as the Executive Director of the Foreign Service Institute, Ma'am Lolita Capco, and the Deputy Director General, Marichula